So the first question is from Kyle. And so this one was about the internal clock and that that circadian rhythm occurs even without external stimuli. And even though we have environmental cues that influence our clock, if someone was to be confined in a space without external stimuli, how would that impact their sleeping schedule and circadian rhythm? Well, there's some really interesting studies that have been done to test just this. What we've found is that whether it's a human or a different animal, a lot of this work has been done on rats. What we find is that we don't actually have a 24-hour rhythm. So if you remove every kind of environmental cue that could set us, that could entrain us to what's going on in our external world. So knowing, when the sun is out and what time it is to eat and all those sorts of things. If you remove all of those external cues, we actually run a little bit more than a 24-hour rhythm. And so this is actually a really interesting study or an interesting factor to look at. And in fact, over the years, we've really argued to have a pretty significantly um, long circadian rhythm, free running rhythm. And so the argument is that we might run as much as 28 hours instead of 24. But it turns out that a lot of that work that was done previously of how we know about that information was probably a little bit tainted. And there are probably some confounds there that weren't controlled for. And so I think it's pretty much agreed upon that a free running rhythm is more than 24 hours, but it might be something like 24.5 or 25 hours. It's not really that much more than 24 hours. But if you look at this over the course of a 24-hour period, as you sleep, it's going to shift every single night. And until you're going to be completely opposite at one point from a typical 24-hour day. And then you're going to continue that pattern. And so there's been one of the first really interesting studies on this was actually by Nathaniel Kleitman and his student Bruce Richardson in 1938. They went into the Mammoth Caves in Kentucky, and many of you might actually be familiar with where this is. And they attempted to spend a little bit more than a month in the caves to get rid of their circadian rhythm. And they found that they had, there were some issues with the study, but it really gave us some really good information on how free running rhythms work. We also see that some people may have free running rhythms who are blind and do not have any light input whatsoever in their eyes. And so they're not able to get certain cues. And so we have actually developed certain medications for those individuals to get onto a 24-hour cycle. But yes, we certainly develop a different kind of rhythm, and it tends to be a little bit more than 24 hours. And then that is something that we continue. And so we keep that rhythm, but it's just adjusted in the sense that, since it's more than a 24-hour day, we see that each day after that, it tends to move a little bit for each day. And at some point, you're going to be opposite of the day, but then you're going to kind of keep going. And then at some point be almost on track, but you're not going to be consistent with your times. So hopefully that answered your question. Chelsea asked a question that I found very amusing. I'm sorry, Chelsea. But she asked a question about toddlers. And I currently have a toddler, and this is my second kid. So I'm very familiar with toddlerhood, although this one right here is certainly more challenging as a little human. And so her question is about that toddlers often fight sleep, and it's usually due to poor hygiene and unstable routines. But if you have a toddler who has a very consistent sleep schedule, who tends to be a good sleeper, you're going to get they're going to fight it. And really the main reason is that toddlers are monsters. Toddlers can be difficult just to be difficult. Many of them do not like to stop what they're doing. So if they are playing with a toy or they are having fun and you're like, it's time for bed, even though it's a consistent schedule and they know to expect it, they're still probably going to fight it. And they're still going to try to make your life difficult because that's what toddlers like to do. They like to challenge and to test their boundaries. And so you can have a kid who is great has a great schedule, great sleeper, and they just simply they don't want to go to bed, because they're having too much fun or they're enjoying life or they're watching something on TV and they don't want to stop. But interestingly enough, toddlers, this age of toddlerhood, so maybe between like 1 and 3 or so, what we find is that their language is developing, and it's developing at astronomical paces. And so what we find is that they often understand and comprehend a whole lot better than they can actually like relay to us. And so what ends up happening is they understand that we want them to go to bed and they understand that we want them to sleep, but they have a hard time communicating to parents that, I'm having a good time and I don't want to stop right now. And so they might not have the language development to really explain themselves. Or if they're not feeling well, or if they're teething, those could also be reasons why a child might have issues with sleep. But these are all definite things that we see in toddlerhood. And so I found on BuzzFeed a nice list, a very funny sort of of reports. Now, I don't know if any of these are true. I just pulled these straight from BuzzFeed. And basically it's things that my toddler gets upset over, ridiculous things that my toddler gets upset over. So I picked a few of these, and I'll give you some examples. My 3-year-old once had a meltdown because I wouldn't let her shove a tampon in her nose. My kid threw a screaming tantrum when I wouldn't let her lick the raw meat I was defrosting. My son once woke up crying because paper towels are rectangular shaped and not triangular. I had to fold a paper towel into a triangle for him to go back to sleep. So, waking up in the middle of the night and then suddenly having this idea, being upset at something ridiculous, these are ways for them to communicate to us and to understand the world around them. Let's see. The toddler had a tantrum because I told my 3-year-old not to wipe his nose with a piece of bread and then eat it afterwards. My kid, these are not mine, these are other people's. My kid cried super hard because the moon was in the sky during the day. He begged me to put it away. My 2-year-old had a sobbing meltdown because her brother had bird poop on his window and she didn't. My 4-year-old recently threw a long tantrum because I opened his granola bar for him. He demanded that I tape it back up for him to open himself. Now, I actually have experienced this with both kids, and this does occur. And sometimes taping it back up does not actually solve it. He got offended that his ice cream was too cold. I think I've been there too. My daughter had a tantrum in the car because her sister was looking out her window. My son cried today because we wouldn't let him chase a stray Cheeto that was blowing across the parking lot. And then one from actually about 2 weeks ago, my 20-month-old had a meltdown because I wouldn't let him eat the lollipop that he threw away. And no, a fresh lollipop was not going to cut it for him. He opened the lollipop, he threw it in the trash, and then he went to go take it out of the trash and he wanted to lick it. And I, of course, said that was disgusting and said no. And then he had a meltdown for a little while. So, toddlers are fun. Have kids, they say, they're fun. Hopefully that answers your question that toddlers they're difficult sometimes. And it might not have anything to do, you might actually be doing anything wrong in terms of getting them consistent sleep. All right. So another question, Kiana said, I know you said in the video that when you cannot sleep to get up and turn the lights on / play on the do not get up and turn the lights on and play on the laptop because it reinforces the issue to your brain. Why is it when I cannot sleep at night without turning any form of light on, all I do is toss and turn in the bed without being able to fall asleep? So I just want to clarify a few things here. You don't necessarily have to not turn on any lights, right? So the point is that you don't want to send the signal to your brain. So if it's like 3 a.m., you wake up and you can't fall back asleep and you're lying in your bed, you're tossing and you're turning. I suggest that you get up. You can turn, some lights on, but obviously you're not going to want to turn on every light in the house. You don't want, to send this message to your brain that it's daylight. You want to avoid your laptop. You want to avoid a tablet and your phone because, it's going to signal blue light to your eyes and it's going to confuse your brain. So, turning on a light or two, not a big deal. And so it seems like you're saying that it doesn't matter, even if you don't turn any lights on, you're still not able to fall asleep. My thing is that when you're having difficulty sleeping, you should get up and get out of the bed. You should get away from your bedroom because you want to give your body and your brain a chance to get sleepy. And so if you can get up out of bed and go do something in another room, whether it's something like maybe you can prep your lunch for that next day, or maybe you can read a book or make a list or do something mundane, do something that doesn't require a laptop, a tablet, a phone. Just do something that is, outside of that. And when you start feeling sleepy, get back into bed. Now, you should basically do this in 20-minute increments. So you get back in the bed, and if you can't fall asleep again within 20 minutes, you should get up and repeat the process. Do something even more mundane, do something that you think is going to make you sleepy. There could be a lot of reasons why you're not able to fall asleep. And a lot of those might not be light related. They might not be something that is impacting you in that regard. Maybe you're not as sensitive to light. The 20-minute increment thing comes from the multi sleep latency test. And so what this is a test developed to see the likelihood of you being able to fall asleep in a reasonable time frame. So it has you do 20-minute increments. And for example, if you can't sleep for 20 minutes, it has you get up and then do something and then come back. And then you would try 20 minutes again. And then whatever time you fall asleep within that 20 minutes and how many times you do it is your score. And so sleep latency is how long does it take you to fall asleep? So, you might have to do this 2 or 3 times, and then maybe the third time you fall asleep within 10 minutes, and then now you're asleep. And the idea behind the sleep latency test is basically like if you in your first session you lie down and you're asleep within 5 minutes, that might be an indicator that you're sleep deprived because you're falling asleep really quickly. Normal is something like maybe taking 10 minutes to fall asleep. So when you're looking at trying to solve this issue of waking up in the middle of the night and falling back asleep, you really want to not stay in the bed for 3 hours tossing and turning. You want to get out of that situation. You want to, get up and try to reduce the anxiety that you're feeling of needing to fall asleep. And a lot of the new techniques like CBTI, which is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, change the way that you're thinking about how you're feeling when it comes to sleep. And so, there's evidence that pre-industrial times we slept in 2 segments, and maybe your brain and your body aren't just used to the kind of new way of sleeping 8 consecutive hours. And so if you think about, hey, there's nothing wrong with me, this is how my body is just, it is, this is how humans have slept for who knows how long, maybe hundreds of thousands of years, we don't know. And come to terms with, okay, well, I know I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night, so I'll go to bed earlier so that way I can get up and be up for an hour and not lose that sleep by, if you have a set wake up time. So try to reduce that anxiety when you wake up, because that actually can contribute to your inability to fall asleep. Oh man, if I don't go to sleep now, I'm not going to get but 3 hours. So if I don't go to sleep now, I'm going to get up, only get 2 hours. So, trying to help that. So hopefully that answered that particular question. Brittany asked about resynchronizing for entrainment. So she says that she can stay up all day and night. She doesn't get tired as long as she's busy doing something, but when she stops, she's going to feel tired. And then she'll take a 15 to 20-minute nap and then continue on. And then she asked about environment and species and how that changes resynchronization. So the absolute best way to entrain your body properly is to do a few things. Now, one thing is bright light in the morning. Within, 30 minutes of waking, 30 minutes of bright light. And this kind of varies from scientist to scientist. They may say, within 30 minutes of waking, get 20 minutes of light. You can get this with a light box. You can get this with just sunlight. If you're going to get a light box, you want to get at least 10,000 lux, because that's going to be about a sunny day, not like a bright sunny day. It might be kind of a sunny day, like a regular sunny day. And that's what you're going to want to have at your disposal, especially during the months where we don't get a lot of sunlight. Being in Appalachia, this is something that a lot of people, I think, struggle with, is feeling sad during the winter months, which is actually a condition, seasonal affective disorder. But being able to entrain your cycle requires bright light in the morning. Then to ensure that your body is entrained properly, you would then try to get not a whole lot of light in the evening. So reduce your electronics exposure at sunset. You can get blue blocker glasses, and we've talked about those in lecture and in slides, where they block the blue light coming into your brain through your eyes. And so if you put those blue blockers on while you're working on your laptop or watching TV, then it's almost like, it's not as good as turning it off, but it blocks that light in. They're kind of amber colored, and they filter out the blue light. So that way your brain can feel tired when it's supposed to. Now, another thing that you could do is use melatonin, but you'd have to use it correctly, and you'd have to use it as a prescription, because, and I've talked about melatonin multiple times in other lectures and other slides. Most people don't realize how melatonin works, and that there are different kinds that you can get in terms of fast release versus slow release. And if you take it at the wrong time in the wrong dose, you are going to really, really feel the effects. You're probably going to be too sleepy in the morning, and maybe either sleepy too early or too late during the night. And so you'd want to make sure that you're using it correctly. And also, the FDA doesn't regulate supplements, so you have no idea how much melatonin you're actually getting. Even though it says the dosage on the bottle, there's no guarantee that's actually the right dosage. And so, obviously you can get sort of dependent on this in the sense that you're getting it externally. And so, you want your body to make it by itself in the right amounts. So if you're trying to entrain your cycle, I would say this is a temporary thing, temporary as in less than a week. So if used correctly, melatonin can be very helpful. If you have if your doctor prescribes it for health reasons, of course, you'll take it under their advice and their process. But you would definitely just need to be careful about how you take melatonin. And I definitely wouldn't do that long term. But this would be something that you would get maybe if you have jet lag, if you maybe went to another country and there was like a 12-hour difference and you want to get back on a cycle. This is a great way to entrain your body. You'll want to avoid those naps, especially if they interfere with sleep. Naps longer than 30 minutes are difficult for your body to adjust to, because then that starts kind of infringing upon your sleep at night. Sounds like you kind of have a kind of an odd sleep schedule. So I would definitely try to get the bright light in the morning, try to maintain a consistent schedule, avoid light at night, avoid electronic use at night, or get those blue blockers. I don't really suggest melatonin use, but if you know how to use it and you're confident that, you can use it temporarily, then that might kind of help set you. And then you would, of course, just rely on your ability to adjust from there, just naturally. Yes, species and environment do impact resynchronization. The environment in terms of where we're talking in the world, if we're talking about a place like Alaska, depending on the season, we can see sunlight being kind of wonky or having complete darkness. So there's some areas with complete light or complete dark at a very long period of time, and that's going to absolutely affect your resynchronization. Different animals have different patterns, and of course different species are going to react differently to resynchronization. And what works for humans that's not going to work for all species. So yes, those things definitely do impact. And where you are, latitude, longitude is going to matter. So if you are, near the equator versus away from the equator, what season, um, what kind of sunlight exposure do you have? So for example, Colorado has some of the highest rates of sunlight exposure compared to other states. Um, with other states and other countries having low exposure. So for example, Alaska tends to have months of darkness. I mean, that's going to affect resynchronization. So yes, all of those things do impact. Now, so hopefully I answered your question. If you have any other questions, you can shoot me a message. So Olivia asked this question. She asked the question and then she said that she found the answer. But I'm going to go ahead and address it anyway since it's on here. And so she's asking about night shifts. Uh, she asked, since we respond so much to light when we sleep, is it bad for our bodies to work night shift? And so she wants to know about us disrupting sleep, and how a full night's sleep on night shift would compare to a full night shift on sleep on day shift. And yes, we do definitely see shift workers having major health issues that we think are related to their circadian rhythm shift. Nurses, flight attendants, many of those, and there are a lot of other shift work positions that we see. Those people tend to have a higher rate of cancer, especially prostate cancer. We see high rates of issues like cardiovascular issues. And we do think that it's related to the shift in circadian rhythm. It could be that so many people who actually work night shift don't tend to stay on night shift. They don't like keep that schedule unless they're working. So if you like have, so many days on, so many days off, and on your days off, you switch back to a diurnal schedule, then you actually are putting your body at risk for really getting confused. And so when we look at how your cells, every cell in your body has a clock, and everything is timed. Everything kind of works together. And when you aren't entrained properly, what ends up happening is that these clocks get misaligned. And things like cancer. Cancer is an issue at a cellular level when we talk about like tumors and things like that. So tumors are, cell growth gone wrong, proliferation gone wrong. And so if your timing is wrong and the instructions in the cell's DNA and RNA are incorrect, then that's going to lead you to, issues with those cells not performing as they're supposed to. And so the idea is that when you take this on a circadian level, you're actually impacting the cell's ability to do its job. And but that's not every single person, right? So there are plenty of people who are on night shift who don't have this issue, might not be sensitive to the circadian entrainment. Just like we have people who smoke all their lives and never get lung cancer. We get people who never smoke a day in their life and get lung cancer. So I mean, it's dependent upon what's in your biology and how much are you affected by your environment. Another thing, and in a question that you asked about, how does it look for a full night's sleep when one's on night shift versus day shift? And we do see that a lot of people have issues with sleeping. They also have psychological and social issues they don't feel connected with friends and family if they're not on the same schedule. So that's why we see a lot of people shifting to day schedule, because maybe they have kids and they want to see their kids go play sports, or need to go to the bank, or they need to do something that's a 9 to 5 schedule, or depending on where they live, like for example, if you live in Wise, there's not a whole lot to do at 3 a.m. That might be when you're awake. And so it's hard to keep that schedule if you live in certain areas. But sleeping during the day is difficult. Ways that you can kind of get around this is heavy blackout curtains that block out light. Trying to reduce distraction as much as possible. So getting a really, really quiet space with the right temperature, all very important for people who need to sleep during the day. But it is difficult. It's not super easy. And to get a good restful, day's sleep is definitely a challenge for a lot of people, and they don't sleep as well, and they do get disrupted for whatever reason. People are trying to get a hold of them because that's when people are awake and doing things. They might feel pressure to, go to some event or something like that during the day, and that could, cut into their sleep. So there's a lot of varying reasons why. sleep might be more difficult for people during the day. So hopefully that answered your question. And if there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. So just send me an email. Make sure that you get onto the Remind app. You can get messages sent, pushed directly to your phone. And I do send quite a few messages on that app to just remind you of different things, like, for example, your sleep diary, reminding you, hey, Sunday, there's a lot of things to do. Make sure you're doing this. Live lecture reminders. So make sure that you are on that app. And I sent a link out with the last reminder email for the live lecture. So click on that and get onto the Remind app. Okay, so if you have any questions, you know where to find me, and I will see you guys next week. And so have a great week and day.